evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Glenn Cronin. I'm the Chief of Police here in Malden. And first order of business, I want to thank Mayor Christensen for his support and unwavering concern when it comes to this somewhat unique issue we're dealing with here. I also want to thank Council President Barbara Murphy for hosting this at the Forestdale School. I also want to recognize Councilor Spatafora, Councilor Winslow, and Ward 5 School Committee member Adam Weldy. So thanks for being here. This is a good turnout. I think by the end of this presentation, we're going to have a better idea of what we're dealing with here. But I would ask that you hold off for questions, concerns, suggestions until the end of the presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to our very capable animal control officer, Kevin Owens.
Thank you, Chief. I first want to thank a couple individuals myself here. I want to thank Mayor Christensen and the City Council for supporting programs like this. We're very unique in the area. To my knowledge, this hasn't been done in this area in quite some time. Mass Wildlife, I'd like to thank them. This was set up with them a couple months ago. We've been in constant communication. Also in the crowd tonight is a very special person to me, and with Mass Wildlife, we have what we call wildlife rehabilitators. Some of you in the crowd may know we have a Malden resident, Linda Amato, who is a licensed Mass Wildlife rehabilitator. Linda and I probably communicate 3 to 4 times a week, and when it comes to raccoons, skunks, injuries, even coyote injuries, Linda is always at the ready. So I want to acknowledge her. Linda's right over there. Thank you, Linda. So we're hoping when you leave here tonight, you'll leave here with some knowledge. We hope that, we get calls every day. And if we convince most of you of what you're dealing with, then we won. Chalis is going to explain to you, but the big thing is, the big question that's going to come up for me, can you pick them up and bring them somewhere else? That's not going to happen. So Chalis is going to touch on that. And relocation of wildlife is illegal. Strictly illegal, unless done by Mass Wildlife, and animal control officers and so forth do not have that authority. So at that time, having said all that, I'd like to introduce from Mass Wildlife in Air, Massachusetts, biologist Chalis Bird for tonight's presentation.
I want to start by just saying that this will be broadcast locally, just so you are all aware. Just take note. But anyway, so my name is Chalis Bird. I'm the wildlife biologist for this area. I am stationed in Air, but I cover up pretty much most of northeast Massachusetts. So again, I work for Mass Wildlife. Mass Wildlife is a state agency. We are responsible for the conservation of freshwater fish, wildlife throughout the Commonwealth. This includes endangered plants and animals, and we really work to restore and protect and manage land for wildlife as well as for human enjoyment. So Mass Wildlife, we try to manage for most of our wildlife species, and that includes coyotes. So we see that as a really important natural resource. We work to help to resolve conflicts and support values, regulating hunting and trapping seasons, and then also regulating animal control agents. And we also help with public education, like today. So coyotes are a valuable species. Ecologically, they're valuable to the ecosystem itself. They help to limit and decrease small mammals, such as rodents. Intrinsically, they hold value from photographers, just for wildlife viewing, to observe them and how they move. Educationally, they're very charismatic species, so they tend to really become a focal point to learn about the environment around the coyotes. Maybe you do a little tracking. You learn about what they're eating, so it tends to broaden everything from there for environmental learning. And recreationally, So for hunters and trappers, oftentimes the pelt is used for coats or for warm weather gear, which is extremely sustainable use of their fur. So coyotes, they're crafty, they're clever, they're intelligent, and they're super efficient, which is why they're often referred to as the wily coyote. It's because of this extreme intelligence and their adaptability that they're able to survive almost anywhere. For instance, you can see that they often survive here in the northern part of the U.S., the northeast part, where our forests are really lush. We have wonderful cover, water availability. But they're also found in areas like Death Valley, where temperatures can exceed over 100 degrees. Sometimes they only get about 2 inches of rain a year. It's amazing. But they're also found in places like here, like Malden, like Revere, like Quincy, even downtown Boston. In areas where coyotes were thought to not be able to exist at all, we find that they're actually thriving. So how many of you have actually seen a coyote in person? Yeah, pretty much everybody, as expected. So they truly are champions of change. They've evolved really clever ways to adapt to multiple environments, including human disturbances, human disturbed environments. They are one of the most adaptable and ecologically successful predators in North America, and some would argue the world. They're common throughout Massachusetts now, but it was not always the case. So coyotes used to mainly occupy, and they're confined to the prairie regions. You can see in the dark orange here. They're confined to mostly the prairie regions. And after extirpation or kind of the local extinction of wolves and of mountain lions, coyotes started to expand eastward and westward. And they started to occupy pretty much all of the United States, with exception to Hawaii and way north in Alaska. So in the 1950s is when we first had reports and documentation of coyotes in Massachusetts. This is some of the first reports here. And again, they are based on reports, so they could have been seen, they're just not reported. By the 1980s, it was becoming more common sites. Still mostly west, but we had some sprinkles eastward. 1990, within 10 years, the reports increased. And it could have been, could have filled that gap, but again, that's just based on reports. And today, after 2000, it's pretty much found throughout Massachusetts. So let's talk a little bit about coyotes and their biology. So Canis latrans is their scientific name, and it means barking dog. They are a subspecies of coyote. So our eastern coyote is one of 19 subspecies of coyotes. They do have some wolf and domestic dog DNA, but it's so small. It's not that much at all. So they're still identified as coyotes, or the eastern coyote. They're typically the size of a medium-sized dog. Females average between 33 to 40 pounds. Males can go up to 50 pounds. Sometimes we'll see larger than that. You get up to 60, but that's quite large. And they do have a variety of coats. You can see a pretty typical standard kind of grizzly look of this coyote pelt here, but they can be blonde, somewhat reddish, black, more of the light vanilla color. So there's a variation of broad spectrum of coat colors. And they're super adapted to just about any habitat. So we're talking fields, to forests, to farmland, to suburban environment, your backyard, and more of the urban environments as well. For example, here we have a super urban environment. This is downtown Chicago. This is a college study. And you can see all these points are movements of coyotes. So they're utilizing these green spaces, but they're certainly utilizing these basically highways or very highly used roads. So they're not just confined to the green space, and I think that's important to note. They also utilize the coast. That's a wonderful place for food to come up from the coast and marshes. Again, another example here, we have Los Angeles. That's pretty urban. You don't get more urban than that. And there's coyotes right in downtown, right outside of downtown Los Angeles, near Dodger Stadium. And there's coyotes here in Malden and Revere, as you all know. And they're utilizing these green spaces, but they're going to be seen, and they're utilizing roads, places that you live in between your houses, behind your houses. Particularly some of the cemeteries. We get calls from people living around the cemetery all the time. And this isn't just from having really great green cover in the cemetery, having some quiet, low disturbance, but it's also the likelihood of intentional feeding and potentially unintentional feeding if there's any trash or left behind. But the intentional feeding is really the cause, the root problem of this. And unfortunately, many neighbors are affected by this. Coyote life cycle. So this time of year, January, coyotes are getting ready, ramping up for the breeding season. They are scent marking everywhere over the past month. They're really establishing their territory, and they're working up their time for breeding in February through March. April through May, the young are usually born, the young of the year. And June through August, this is typically when the adults are teaching the young how to hunt and how to forage. September through November, this is typically when the young disperse, if they disperse. They are typically most vocal around the mating season, and then during the summer when they're learning how to use their voice, how to hunt, how to communicate. So social organization. A population typically consists of a family group, which centers around the alpha pair. There's usually juveniles and then young of the year. Now this family group is highly territorial. This is kind of what you imagine of the typical coyote being. But they're also transients, and these transients are made up of subordinate adults or juveniles and even dispersed young of the year. So they kind of move in between these home ranges, trying to find habitat of their own, trying to find food, and potentially trying to find a mate or a family group if there's been a mortality or a loss. So home range sizes truly depend on food abundance is one of the largest drivers, and it definitely varies through rural versus suburban environments. So what do I mean by that? So in an area where it's more rural, the food is more displaced. So we're talking more the forested area. Food is displaced. They're going to have a larger home range because they need to move further away to find their food. Now in more suburban and urban environments, that home range shrinks quite a bit to up to 5 square miles. And it does that because there's so much food available in such a small space. They don't need to go very far. They've got tons of food available that you all provide them with unintentionally, hopefully. Then we've got the transients. And the transients can go up to 200 square miles, again, weaving through. And in some locations, they can go even further than that. So when I'm talking about the home range, this is a great image here, and each color is a different family group, basically. So these are it's a GPS collar study, and each color is a different family group. And you can see here that in the suburban environment, it's very clustered, right? They're small. These are not large home ranges. They don't need to be. But the other thing you can note is that there's not much overlap between home ranges because there's plenty of food. They're not going to have those massive home ranges. So usually for the young, there's about 6 pups per litter, but it can range from 1 to 9 depending on the food availability and health of the mother. Pups are usually weaned after about 35 days when they no longer depend on the mother's milk. At this time, they'll start to leave the den site. They'll start to get more curious. That's when you're going to start to see them exploring more. And around 6 to 8 months, they may disperse. Some of them may stay with the family group if there's that food availability. So howling and other vocalizations. This is typically a means of communication. It's a communication among family group members to defend the home range against transients. It helps to attract a mate during that breeding season, and pups practice this quite often during the summer, learning how to communicate with one another. This is not malicious usually, and it's not kind of to announce predation. They're not going to start barking if they're about to kill something. That's just not how any of us would do it. So what drives the population of coyotes? It's all about abundant resources and the resources that are available. So in these abundant resources, we tend to see higher coyote densities. So the mother's healthy, she's able to produce a lot of litters, the pup survival rates tend to increase because she can produce more milk, the yearling breeding numbers increase, and family size usually increase as well because they don't need to leave their family unit because there's plenty of food available, plenty to go around. So you get overall higher coyote density. And opposite, in times of scarce resources, we tend to see lower coyote densities. We have smaller litter sizes, and pup survival rates are typically lower. The mother just can't produce enough milk. She just isn't healthy enough if there's not enough food available. The breeding yearlings also decrease, and the family size tends to decrease or stay the same because there's that dispersal. Go out and find your own food. I can't feed you anymore. So coyote populations are dynamic and ever-changing, and they change based on resources, and that is the most important thing to take home from this. So let's play a quick game of true or false. This is going to test all your coyote expert knowledge. Maybe you'll learn something as well. Okay, coyotes only eat meat. False. Excellent, false. We know that although their teeth say otherwise, they're definitely, the dentition indicate that they are carnivores, but they are opportunistic omnivores. They will eat anything and everything they can get. Some of their natural food sources are eggs, small mammals, insects, amphibians, fruits, berries that they can find in the landscape, the occasional fawn. Then there's also human-associated food sources that they certainly take advantage of. So we're thinking here, getting into your gardens. They love your fruits and vegetables in the gardens. Anything through your compost, they'll dig through that. Chicken, who doesn't like chicken? Any of your small pets, so cats, small dogs, any pet food that's left out to feed feral cats or your dog outside, they will take advantage of that, and they will be attracted to your home. They will come closer to your home. Garbage, we know that they'll definitely tear apart your garbage. And then bird seed, they will certainly eat bird seed, but they will also eat any little mammals that come to your bird feeder. So again, all of these things are pulling the coyotes closer to your home. True or false? Coyotes seen during the day are always or mostly sick or injured. False. False. Good. When do you see pictures of coyotes? What time of day? Anytime. But most of the pictures you see are during the day, right? Yeah, so it's normal. They will be active any time of day that they can get food, just like you or I. So they're typically, although I will say, as they move into an urban environment, if it's new, they tend to be a little more shy and elusive, and they tend to more towards nocturnal lifestyle because of those disturbances. And these disturbances are, what are some disturbances you can think of? Cars, people, trails, or trains, beeping, any type of loud noises, people moving around, just a day-to-day hustle and bustle. Those are disturbances. As they get more acclimated and comfortable with humans and human disturbances, they tend to shift back towards day. They are always more active, though, at dawn and dusk. That's pretty much typical wherever you can find coyotes. Coyotes can be difficult to identify. True. We get a lot of reports where people think that they've seen a coyote and they see a dog. Or they thought they saw a dog and it was really a coyote. So they can be confused sometimes, especially if it's a quick run or it's a quick movement. But there are some key defining characteristics of a domestic dog versus a coyote. Domestic dogs usually have a more robust muzzle. They've got that nice fat nose right there. And they tend to be kind of shorter and stout. Where coyotes tend to be long and lanky, more svelte. They've got the more narrow nose. Typically ears that are higher up unless they're comfortable, kind of laying around. But they're just overall, they just look a little more leggy. So those are some identifications. But again, when they're on the run, it can be pretty difficult. True or false, eastern coyotes are bigger than western coyotes. Ooh, we got a mixed bag. It's true, they are typically larger than eastern coyotes. So here's two skulls. The one in the foreground is a western coyote, and the one in the back is the eastern coyote. Eastern coyotes tend to be, on average, about 10 pounds heavier, so not that much heavier. But with a coyote that's only about 35, 45 pounds, 10 pounds is quite a bit. It seems to be quite a bit on that animal. So why are they a little bit larger? Well, it has to do with that eastward expansion. As the wolf population was declining massively through extermination, they were able to mate with coyotes. So as the western coyotes moved, they're mating with a wolf. So normally a wolf would keep a coyote at bay, or they're competitors with coyotes. But in times of such low density, we do see that has happened, and it's in their DNA. And it's not too much. It's only 15% max for the most part. And there's a lot of domestic dog for the same reason in there. But because of that mix of domestic dog and wolf and coyote all together, it makes for a little bit more robust, larger coyote. So why are some of the other reasons that, even though it's only a 10-pound difference, but why are some of the other reasons that people tend to be a little more fearful of coyotes? Or they always appear massive. This is an 80-pound coyote, 90-pound coyote. This thing was bigger than my 100-pound lab. Well, I think it's all the idea of predator perception in your head too. So when you think of a coyote, you think of big teeth, and you think of it being large, but they also tend to have some really beautiful adapted fur. And this fur is very specialized for the seasons that they have to deal with. So summer and winter. In the winter, they have this beautiful, luxurious fur. It's 4 or 5 inches long, right? And it can encapsulate the entire body. So imagine adding 4 to 5 inches around your entire body. That makes you seem much larger. Their perception is that it's a much larger animal. But if we were to throw that animal in water, or if we were to see that they are in their summer coat, we can see that this is a kind of a scrawny little thing, right? It's all legs. It's a very lean, almost torpedo-like, but they're pretty much not much of the body there. So removing coyotes will decrease the overall population. You guys are good. False. That's right. So what happens at the town level when there is a loss of a coyote in a family group through mortality? Well, we see pretty much within a year, the coyote's going to replace that coyote. So anytime there's a loss, there's always going to be another to take its place. There could also be a subordinate that comes up from within that family group, again, to take its place. So what happens if both coyotes of the dominant pair have the mortality? Same thing. A chimpanzee will come in, or a subordinate will move up. But with every loss, there's always going to be a replacement. So anytime people speak of removing a coyote or trying to hunt for the population, it's just not as effective. We see for a very long time that people have been trying to kill off coyotes. They've put bounties on them, they've tried to poison, hunt to extinction, the same things that they try to do with mountain lions and wolves, and they can't happen. They're just constantly rebounding, and they rebound very quickly. So when we look at this on a larger scale, when we look at the population level, not just the town level, what do we see? So if there's mortality in the population, so increased mortality, we see that there's a decrease in competition. So there's more resources available. We see with those more resources, larger litter sizes, higher survival rates, and more yearlings that are able to breed, and the population recovers. So every dent in the population, it kind of gets refilled. So in summary, coyote populations quickly respond to reductions in the number of coyotes, and their ability to respond reproductively is also self-regulating. So when people say, hey, get these coyotes out of here, we could, but it would never ever work. So why would we? I mean, it's not legal, so we really can't, but it can't happen. So coyotes are here and they're here to stay. So the most important thing is working preventatively, and we'll talk more about that. A coyote that attacks a dog will attack a human. False. That's right. So coyotes are very territorial, like we spoke of, and dogs are competition. So when not under the direct control of a human, so you have your dog on a short leash, an attack on a dog is not abnormal behavior. So if you don't have your dog contained, it's running free, it's moving free, particularly during breeding season, we see that there's more attacks. And it's because they don't differentiate your dog versus another coyote if they're defending their territory. So many people are concerned or afraid of coyotes. True, absolutely. So concerns that we often get are just the general presence. Maybe that's why you folks are here today, but we're also getting concerns of perceived threats. These are common. We get tons of calls every year from all of our offices about perceived threats. Livestock depredation, so that's live killing of the livestock. That's what depredation means. It's uncommon, but it's probably underreported. And then there's the depredation of your dogs or the cats. This is common. It's probably underreported as well. And then human attacks or human incidences. And the majority of any of these incidences have been linked to intentional feeding or trying to protect their pet that a coyote might be lunging after. So that's what we are finding. So what constitutes normal coyote behavior? Sorry. Just gonna get this slide. So why do these conflicts occur? It stems from the human behavior and tendencies. One, intentional feeding. We find that often any of these conflicts come from intentional feeding. You've seen that this whole past year and before that. And then unintentional feeding. And this is probably even more common. People call and say, hey, there's a coyote here, it's in my yard, what do I do about it? Okay, well, what do you have? Do you have birdseed? Do you have compost? Do you have garbage? Yes, yes, yes. So all those things are drawing coyotes to your property. Then the other parts of this is the lack of hazing and submissive body language. So they see the coyote, they don't like them there, but then they go back inside. They're not educating the coyote, teaching them how to be fearful of humans. So some of these human-associated food sources that we talked about are bird feeders. Garbage and compost, super common. Pets, pet food, gardens, any fruits. When these coyotes are constantly rewarded with these food items that are close to your home, that's when the habituation occurs. It's usually it occurs when there's any lack of threats, so you're not doing any hazing when you see the coyotes. They're acclimated to human presence. They're just coming and going. Any human-associated foods that they're getting rewarded with, any of those things will cause a coyote to become more and more and more comfortable. This can lead a coyote to becoming more and more bold. So what's normal and what's abnormal for coyotes? Well, we know that frequent use of residential area, that's completely normal behavior. Frequent daytime activity, any nighttime attack on unsupervised pets, or daytime attack on unsupervised pets. That's normal coyote behavior. They're just doing what they know to do. What's abnormal, and this is when it gets more bold, is an attack on a leashed pet, under your direct control. Any approaches are following you and they're not fleeing, they're not turning around when you kind of haze and wave your arms. And or they physically attack people. All of these things, these last three things constitute a public threat or a public safety issue or a public threat, okay? And these things need to be addressed. So what do we do if we do have an aggressive coyote? Well, there's some, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So if the animal is confirmed a threat to public safety, there are some ways you can go about doing this, and that would be through law enforcement officers, animal control officers, if they're deputized, any mass environmental police officers, or any coyote-certified problem animal control agents, municipal problem animal control agents, and then licensed hunters and trackers. However, we do have, we have to make sure through any of the hunting and trapping or ACOs or problem animal control officers, we have to make sure that we follow all discharge restrictions. They all apply, and I'll talk more about that. So there's some legality and limits with any removal of a problem animal. Relocation of wildlife is prohibited. We already touched on that. Transport is only for euthanasia. That's basically what that is for problem animals. We have a ton of trapping restrictions in Massachusetts from the 1996 ballot initiative, and it limits us to folks to box traps. Box traps are pretty much ineffective for coyotes. They're too smart, they're too cautious, they will not typically go into a box trap at all. So trapping is basically, it doesn't do anything. You get no animals trapped in a box trap, no coyotes trapped in a box trap for a year. So some of the restricted traps were the leg hold trap, the foothold trap, and the body gripping traps. Foothold traps are very efficient for canids. That's how all the wolves were relocated into Yellowstone, is from foothold traps. So they're very useful for very smart animals to be trapped. But then hunting and firearm discharge restrictions. Of course, statewide, we have 150-foot setback from a road, 500 feet from an occupied dwelling. And then there's, so that would be statewide, but then there's additional laws and rules and regulations that towns may put in place. And this makes it very difficult to utilize hunting as a way of potentially taking any animal that may be a problem animal. So for example, here we have Gloucester, and you can see how large Gloucester is. And in red, you see the setbacks. So these are the road setbacks and the house setbacks. And what you have in green is what's left over that could be hunted. But because Gloucester has no hunting available, no hunting ordinance, no discharge of a firearm ordinance, there's that possibility of hunting to potentially take a problem coyote is gone. So now what are we left with? So if you see a coyote in urban or suburban neighborhoods, haze them. True or false? True. That's what we're left with. We're left with hazing and prevention. Hazing is a very appropriate response. Anytime an animal is within your comfort zone, hazing is the way that you want to move forward with that. So you're using your voice, you're being loud, you're making noise, you're using your body, you're approaching in some situations. You have to mock charge. There's a multitude of different things you can do, and we're going to go into that in more detail here, because we're going to use hazing as resolving and preventing conflicts. So in order to prevent any of these conflicts, we really need to do two things. One, remove any human-associated food sources and practice your hazing. So eliminating foods, we want to eliminate bird feeders. Bird feeders is one of the biggest problems we have. I know we all love to see the birds, but it attracts so many issues to your house. And then what? You're going to call us and we're going to tell you the same thing, or you're going to unfortunately create a problem animal. You want to secure your garbage at homes and businesses. Businesses is a big one. We see a lot of calls coming from actually around businesses that keep their dumpsters open. You want to use compost containers, so close them up. And feed pets inside and do not feed strays. Big, stop intentional feeding. If there's any intentional feeding going on, that needs to stop immediately. Here's an example of intentional feeding with a coyote with a GPS collar at this location. This is called typically what we'd see as a wagon wheel. So there you've got one feeding location. That coyote's coming from multiple areas, coming back and forth to this feeding location. This is eventually going to lead to a mortality. Whether it's from a mortality of crossing roads, getting hit, or it becomes very bold and aggressive, and now that coyote needs to be taken out or removed. So what is hazing? How do we actually go forward with hazing? So we've already removed any potential food sources, but now we want to start with training. So if you guys have dogs, then you know you've already done some form of hazing with them. If you don't want them on the couch and they jump on the couch, what do? Tell them to get off. You're teaching them what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And it's the same thing with coyotes. So hazing, you want to be loud, make offensive noises. You can use air horns, whistles, bang pots and pans. You can throw objects that will, without the intent to harm. So this is educating, not harming. So tennis balls, water balloons, wet softballs. You can spray with a hose or a water gun. Use aggressive body language. Eye contact is really important. But you never want to run away. You want to stand your ground and be direct and make sure that you are indicating to the coyote that you are the one that's in charge here. You don't want to retreat. You don't want to open up your door, yell, say, hey, get out of here, coyote, and close the door. Because all that's saying is saying, hey, go ahead, and closing the door. So you want to make sure you're hazing continuously every time you see an animal and consistently until they've moved away, until they've moved to a distance that you're comfortable with. So each time they'll know, okay, this is too close. I don't want to be here. This is uncomfortable. You can also modify habitat, so cut back brushy areas, remove brush piles, make sure you can disturb or eliminate any den sites if you don't want them there. And you want to protect your pets. Again, dogs are competitors, so we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect that. That's our job, to protect our pets. You can do this by keeping them on leash or create fencing. If you want your dogs to run free around your yard, there's some great fencing. Just like dogs, coyotes can jump fences, can climb fences. So you want to make sure they're about 6 feet high and they have roll bars. So all that is when they jump up to kind of pull themselves over, they can't because they roll right off the top. Contain your livestock. Electric fencing, avoid free-ranging practices, keep house cats indoors, and make sure the dogs are leashed and closely supervised. So what should kids do? Teach kids the difference between a coyote and a dog. Basically, don't let them touch or play with an animal that they don't know. No dog unless they know the dog. Because we actually get way more bites from dogs a year than anything a coyote could do. I mean, substantially more bites from a dog. You can tell themselves to make themselves look bigger. Bring an umbrella, open that up. Wave your arms, and then slowly back away, but do not run. That typically elicits a behavioral response from the coyote. Find an adult to help haze the coyote. So let's say, okay, I get all this, but I'm afraid to walk. What do I do? Well, there's a few options. Bring some type of protective weapon with you if that makes you feel safe. So a walking stick, that's great. An air horn, that helps you make loud noises, especially if you have a hard time projecting. Even an umbrella. So an umbrella opens and closes, and that's wonderful to use, not only for coyotes, but for turkeys. I know that's an issue too. And then dog repellent or bear spray. Those items really help. They broadcast very largely, and they're made for animals. Then lastly, if you don't have a problem coyote, if the coyote is doing its thing, if they're in the park just kind of cruising along, trying to avoid humans, it's best to also remember that there is some form of tolerance you have to bear. They are here, they're going to be here. General presence without a nuisance shouldn't be a problem. Hearing them howl, enjoy it. It's pretty amazing you get to hear that. Some people in super rural environments do not get to hear that. So enjoy it, learn from it. And then allow them to pursue those natural available food sources. Try not to bring them closer to your home, because unfortunately what's going to happen is you are going to create a problem coyote. And ultimately, if that coyote has to be lethally removed for whatever reason, a bite occurs, it's going to be your fault. So you have to internalize that and know that any intentional feeding and anything, I know if it means well to the coyotes, but ultimately it could be their mortality, and it is, you've caused that. So coyotes are here to stay. So there's nothing we can do in terms of the population size, but we can make sure we work with the population we have, the individuals we have, to make sure that we're not letting them become problem coyotes. We don't want to guide them to become problem coyotes. We want to just let them be wild coyotes that have a healthy fear of humans. Thank you. Okay, so I'm taking questions. Dave Waddles is the fur bearer biologist, which he's the statewide biologist of our fur bearers. And we're both available for questions if you have them. And just raise your hand and shout, yep.
Well, I think taking your last point, whenever I see coyotes, I have a few times, and I'm taking a walk, coyotes are always a little ways away from me. It's been one coyote, every time, possibly transient coyote. I've just seen one coyote a few times. The coyote is always in the ways away from me, and so I just couldn't be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's never any time.
Yeah, she just said, for those of you who didn't hear, that she does see a coyote in the distance, and it's at a comfort level for her, so she just lets it be, and that's totally fine as well. Yep.
What if you have a little white, bushy dog that likes when you take them on a leash to walk, right? Coyote comes, and my little thing thinks that she's so powerful that she barks at everything, right? What to do with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So she's asking, you're taking a dog for a walk, and the dog reacts to the coyote, and the dog that you have is on leash. That's common. Your dog is very typically going to react to a coyote. What you want to do is you want to act the same way. Haze, aggressively haze, make loud noises, be present. A dog alone is, if it's a small little dog, it could be potential prey. Larger dog is usually competition. But they're less likely to do anything with you on the other end. There is research to show that the behavior does change of a coyote when a human is present versus not, and then during different types of seasons. So during typically breeding season, the coyote may linger a little bit longer than you think, and that's normal. It's going to linger and say, is this worth it? Is this a risk I want to take? And you just haze heavier, you haze harder, and eventually that coyote will move away. But that's the most important thing, is to stand your ground, haze, and just when you think, okay, this is not enough, just keep going, because they do tend to act a little bit differently and a little more hesitant to kind of move away during that breeding season. Yes?
I had a coyote come up and basically, middle of the morning, sit in my backyard for about 2.5 hours. And everybody around me were taking pictures through our windows and stuff. But I didn't scare him away, I just let him be.
Yeah.
How would you handle that?
So his question
Really
was,
close to me.
so a coyote, and you were inside?
Yeah.
Okay. So a coyote was outside utilizing the lawn, laying in the lawn. And if you're comfortable with that coyote there, there's no need to haze. But remember that the coyote also feels comfortable.
Yeah.
So if the coyote feels comfortable, he's going to keep coming back. If you are okay with the coyote keep coming back,
Not so much.
then exactly, that's exactly right. So in terms of that type of situation, what I would have done, because I wouldn't want a coyote coming back to my yard like that, is to go outside, stand on your doorstep, or whatever, bang pots and pans, and make them feel uncomfortable. Because they will keep coming back to any place that they feel like they can rest, lay down, take a nap, get some sunshine, whatever. They're gonna feel comfortable there, and they're gonna remember that, and they're gonna wanna come back. So it's really important, whatever you don't like, whatever you feel discomfort with, whatever you think your neighbors are gonna feel uncomfortable with, make sure that you haze and you prevent those actions from happening again. Anything to add, Dave?
Hi everyone, Dave Waddles. I'm the state black bear and fur bear biologist. Yeah, so you're trying to teach these animals to be fearful and to not be comfortable around your homes. So it's important that every single time you're seeing them around your yards is you are being aggressive. These behaviors and this hazing is going to build. The more people in the community that are doing it, the more effective it's going to be. If it's every time a coyote is encountered while you're walking your dog or it's in your backyard, if it's being harassed every single time, it's not going to want to sit in your backyard because it knows you're going to come out and chase it off right away. Or if while you're walking your dog, every single time you act hyper-aggressively towards that animal, it's not going to be as comfortable hanging out and approaching you. So that's what you're trying to do, is change these animals' behavior over the long term. I'll just follow up on you for with your walking your dog. If you're concerned, carry something with you that you can use to drive the coyote off, as Chalis said. Whether it's a citronella spray or self-defense pepper spray, if you have that close encounter, you have something with you that can drive that animal off should it become aggressive towards you. But do be aggressive and maintain those hazing behaviors really at all times.
Okay, I've seen one coyote here, one coyote there, but people say they've seen two at one time. What are the chances that if you're walking down the street and you'll see 3 or 4 coyotes at one time, if you're walking your dog, or if you're not walking your dog? Do they walk in packs of more than 2? Do they walk in packs of 3 or 4?
I'm sure Dave will add some stuff to this too, but typically you'll be seeing the 1 or 2 kind of moving around their territory, especially the 1 if it's a transient. And sometimes you'll see family groups. You'll see family groups together, and it's not. I mean, it's uncommon. It's not super typical, but you can see family groups together.
And do you still do the same kind of?
Absolutely, yeah. Same hazing. You want to keep and like he said, consistency. And I think the thing to drive home is consistency. When you're training your dog, when you're training a child, when you're doing anything, if there's some deviation, they're gonna say, is it this time that they're gonna let me get away with it? Or, this last time it didn't really haze me, maybe I'm okay this time. But if you're consistent every single time, that's where the training truly solidifies. So even in those situations, hazing, have you ever seen more than 2 at once?
No.
Has anyone here seen more than 2 at once together? So here you go, here's your percentage. What was the max that people have seen? 2? 3? Mostly 3, yeah. 7 at one time, all together.
What do you do if you suspect your neighbor is feeding?
I would recommend calling your animal control officer in that kind of situation. So the question was, what do you do if you suspect your neighbor is feeding? If you have a good relationship with your neighbor and you can have a reasonable conversation with them and try to, not everyone is getting this information that you're getting tonight. What are the repercussions for feeding that animal? The problems that it's causing both for their neighbors and the rest of the community, but also for the animal long term. If you can explain that and they're comfortable doing so, absolutely do so. If you feel that it's going to cause a confrontation between you and your neighborhood, call the animal control officer. They may be able to go and talk to that person and explain and educate that person and hopefully get them to stop.
I live in Malden, but I'm on the Melrose Method Malden line. Nothing behind me but conservation land.
Yeah.
So we have deer, rabbit, turkeys, and lately we've been seeing quite a few stray cats. And as a result, we've been seeing so many coyotes. I have a feeling there's a den up in the area where I live. What do I do about that?
So the question was that they live near conservation land, and that they're seeing lots of varied wildlife of different species, but also lots of coyotes. So those natural areas, obviously the area is mostly developed, but there are a few natural areas. So whether it's blocks of forest, it's cemeteries, it's golf courses, all those things, wetlands, those provide small refuges that the wildlife are going to use. So if you live adjacent to one of those, just know that that is going to be a place that coyotes are naturally going to be. They link together several of those natural communities and then move amongst your neighborhoods as well to take advantage of food. That's how coyotes use these urban environments. So it's fully expected that they would be using those places. So that's even more so where you know they're going to be living close to your home. It's even more important to not have foods around your home so you're not attracting them out of the woods and into your backyard or into your neighborhood. Aggressively hazing them still. If they come into your yard, chase them, not only to the edge of the yard, but keep chasing them into the woods and drive them back so that it's like, okay, you can be in the woods, but when you come out, I'm going to haze you and chase you out. So the same things over and over again really are the drive and take-home messages. Just to go back to the question about seeing animals. So when you see multiple animals together, that's how coyotes teach their young how to be a coyote. So the adults will take one or two of the young out and show them where to find food, how to move around their territory. And so that's where you're typically seeing more than one individual. So it's not uncommon for them to travel around as individuals. And then occasionally you will see the larger groups as the whole family gets together, typically in an open space like a cemetery or a golf course or something like that.
I think I saw one coyote once, but I was like maybe 2 or 4 yards away. I live by the trail, But let's say if I'm walking the trail and I saw one and I see one, what do I do? Do I just keep walking or ignore them? I don't have to do anything, but I walk, I usually try to walk by the trail. So what do I do?
Yeah, so again, anytime you see a coyote, if you're walking on the trail, it's walking near you, you want to make sure you're creating a buffer for yourself. So hazing. Hazing until they're at a point where they are fearful of you. In a normal situation, a coyote should see you and move away to their own comfort zone. That's typically what you want the coyotes to eventually do. So in this situation, they're kind of standing there watching you like, oh yeah, there's nothing human. That's when you want to make sure you're doing the hazing. Teach them to be afraid of humans. So that, again, if you were to be walking down the trail again and you see a coyote, you should just be seeing the tail. And they should be moving as far away from you as fast as possible. That's normal coyote behavior. That's what you want to see.
In this area, what is considered a den? Are they build a nest? Do they live under buildings? Where?
So this question is a great question. It's about what do you expect a den to be made of? There's variations of dens. You've had dens under root balls, excavated out from foxholes. We have a ton of people calling under their sheds, under their porches, within some rocks, a brush, underneath some brush. So that's when I said make one of the options you can do in the presentation I said is kind of clear out some brushy areas. And that helps to decrease potential den sites, but also hiding corridors. So dens can be a multitude of whatever they can find as a safe cover for their young pups to nurse and to grow large enough where they can take on the elements. Anything to add to it? Oh yeah, so to that point, this is where it is important that you do prevent any denning. So sealing up underneath any sheds or porches, anything, moving any debris, removing rock piles if you've got some slash that's down, kind of getting rid of that, clearing out the area, clearing potential den sites or preventing potential den sites from occurring. Particularly right now is the time of year that you're going to want to look around and say, okay, where would be a great place for an animal to take shelter to raise their young in a nice, quiet, comfortable location, and then prevent that from happening.
Just one quick thing to add. Around here, and I saw it just driving through here, is there's places where you have large rock outcroppings. So boulder fields and rock piles in some of the natural areas. That's a place that typically they will den. They can enlarge burrows underneath those rocks and things. So that could be a place if you're taking your dog and you're walking in some of these natural areas and you see a coyote that you're regularly seeing coyotes, particularly in the spring in those areas, and if they're acting aggressively, that could be an indication that there is a den in that area. And if in the spring you think there's a den in an area, people are reporting aggression from one area, I'd just avoid that area with your dogs for a couple of weeks to a month, just, you know, to avoid that source of conflict if there is a den in that spot.
Just a simple question. Why should we have coyotes within the urban area? It doesn't belong here. It belongs to the forest.
So basically the comment was that, you know, why should there be coyotes in an urban area, a heavily developed area like this? And as Chalis talked about earlier in the talk, these animals are highly, highly adaptive to essentially everywhere in the country. The biggest cities, Chicago, Los Angeles, Boston, they're living in these places. And they're highly successful. And as you mentioned, it's virtually, say, we determined as a state agency, we're going to try to get rid of coyotes in the eastern Massachusetts because we don't want them in these urban areas. It's impossible to do so. Historically, there have been efforts to try to eradicate coyotes in this country, and they're unsuccessful because of the inherent biology of the population. It just does not work, and so it's not possible. Which is why we're trying to come here to teach you about coexisting, because you know even if there was a problem animal and even if it was removed, there's more coyotes around. They're going to be around in the future. So it is important to learn to coexist and to teach these coyotes not to develop these negative behaviors.
Actually, part of trying to get rid of to your question, they actually have a special breeding capability that most of the mammals don't have. Females can actually become pregnant from sperm that is stored from a previous mate. So all the males we got rid of will still get pregnant females. When the population goes down, they have a hormonal response that causes them to actually produce more and produce bigger babies. So they're special. We can't get rid of them.
And also, as we talked about a third of their populations consist of those transients. So it's not only just their ability to reproduce and produce larger litters, but it's also the fact that there are animals readily waiting to come in and establish territories in those areas. So again, it's just something that's not practically possible.
Do you have like an accurate guess even as to the numbers that we're seeing in Malden in the surrounding area?
Not really. You know, it's very difficult to do so. So you know, any estimates would be, you know, basically the approximate size of a coyote territory. You know, as Chalis referenced earlier, it's around 3.5 to 5 square miles in urban areas. But it's also difficult to predict territories because they do knit together that network of natural areas, so they can be irregularly shaped to take into account those areas. So it can be difficult to predict. But you know, a lot of towns will have 2 or 3 coyote packs or family groups that are using portions of the town. So it's distinctly possible. But you know, then you know, part of their territory could also be in Revere or the next town over as well.
Okay, so do they hunt in packs, or would they tend to attack in packs?
So the question was if they hunt in packs. You know, the bulk of coyote natural prey is small mammals. So mammals up to the size of a woodchuck. So they're not like a wolf that is, you know, chasing down deer, or you know, elk or moose, where they're, you know, hunting in a pack to achieve that. They can, and certainly in certain circumstances, do that. But typically, it's they're going out as pairs. You know, one of the adults and one of the young members going out to try to find food together. But sometimes they do get into larger groups as well. And they are, if conditions are right, they are capable of taking down adult deer. If the deer is injured, or you have very deep snow, or certain conditions, the deer is weak or injured, they can take down larger prey, certainly as well.
I want to add on that note with how he was talking about the small mammals. So one of the benefits too of helping to decrease any available food sources, so taking down your bird feeders, closing up your trash or not putting it out until that day, or covering up your compost, all of those things help to also decrease the rodent population. So any rats, mice, anything that's utilizing that as well, all of those things, those preventative measures are going to bring down the rodent population, which is a benefit. but then also help to bring down any available food sources for those coyotes. So keeping that in mind, it's not just coyotes that helping to remove those food sources is going to deal with, but it's going to deal with a plethora of potential problem animals. And one of the biggest benefits is the reduction of rodents.
We got a question up here. There. Yep, just one second. Yeah, just what Chalis just said just reminded me too. You know, the other thing that the food around your homes does, it supplements the population. You know, so it allows more coyotes to exist in town than if they were just relying on natural food. So, you know, if you don't want as many coyotes around, don't provide the food for them, and there won't be as many around. So it's
someone who's in the medical world, used to work in urgent care. I saw multiple injuries from squirrel bites, which are extremely dangerous and can be rabid, and never saw a coyote bite. And so my point is, you don't want to feed animals that are in the wild, whether they're pigeons, squirrels, coyotes, whatever. Let them live and let them do their thing. But from a medical standpoint, they're generally not a problem.
yeah. So the comment was about, you know, feeding wildlife and it leading to bites and conflict with other animals. And he was referencing that as a medical professional that he had seen multiple bites from squirrels from people feeding. And you know, Chalis referenced that bites from coyotes are uncommon. We've only ever had 32 reported to us in Massachusetts. And the vast majority of those, as you said, in recent years are resulting from intentional feeding. So these are still very uncommon. And this, like you said, for talking to children, bites from domestic dogs are far, far more common. In our entire history, we've had 32 from coyotes in this state. There are millions of bites in the United States of domestic dogs every single year. And so let's not overemphasize the danger or potential threat of coyotes biting people, certainly.
Are they a little more dangerous when they're with their pups, like a bear would be with them?
Yeah, so the question was if they're more dangerous when they're with their pups, in referencing a female bear with cubs. Certainly one of the times a year where we see an increased level of aggression is in the spring, when they have a den and they have young pups in it. That's definitely one of the spikes in aggression that we have. The aggression is still directed towards dogs. So often it ends up being people that are walking dogs in the vicinity of a den and coyotes acting aggressively towards those dogs. So again, that's where it's the importance of keeping your dog on your leash. And then that's where the hazing comes in throughout the rest of the year. If you've been regularly hazing coyotes, it's going to be more, it's going to provide greater protection for you as you're walking for your dog, because that coyote is going to be fearful of you. So it really is, it's typically in the spring and it is towards domestic dogs.
As we know, Malden has a rodent problem and has for maybe the last 5 years. And so Yankee Pest comes to my house twice a year and they put black boxes down underneath my deck because I had a rat problem. We did find a dead rat, so obviously that worked. Now there's a coyote that cuts through my driveway every morning. So would it eat that dead rat, and would that poison within that rat kill that coyote?
Yeah, so the question was about using poison and rodenticides to control rodent and rat populations around your homes. Unfortunately, poisoning of wildlife is becoming an increasingly large issue because people put out poison. You can find it at any hardware store to deal with rodents, but then raptors eat those rodents. So hawks and owls are constantly getting poisoned. Bald eagles are getting poisoned. Bobcats, coyotes, fox, they're all, as they eat more and more of these poisoned rodents, the poison builds up in their system over time. And there's almost not a single coyote, fox, whatever, that you can test anywhere in the Northeast for rodents that doesn't come up, or that you can test for poison that doesn't come up positive. So unfortunately, poison is a large issue for wildlife these days, and it would be our recommendation to never use poison. If you have a rodent problem you need to deal with, trapping is definitely the way to do it. That will deal with the rodent problem, but won't have the compounding effects on other wildlife.
Are they generally, all the pictures are daylight pictures, are they usually just roaming around during the day, or do they roam around at night?
Yeah, so the question was whether they're, most of the pictures are during the day, whether they're active at day or also at night. They're likely more active at night. While they're comfortable because they're born, raised, and live their entire lives in a developed place, they're comfortable being out during the day here. But at the same time, at night, you're all at home. There's less traffic, there's less noise, there's less interaction with people, and so they do tend to be more active, and that's more typically where they'll be going through backyards and neighborhoods at that time, because everyone's inside, and then they can go and they can find the foods we have around our homes.
If I discover that I have a den of coyotes on my front porch, do I call the Malden Animal Control, or do I call pest company?
Yeah, so the question is, if you do find you have a den of coyotes, or it could be fox underneath your den, there's some simple things that you can do to resolve that situation. Simply harassing that den site, so you can take a radio and you can play like talk radio on there, or just leave it on there all the time. When the parents come back to feed the young, they're not going to like that. That's going to make them uncomfortable, and they're going to move their pups elsewhere and find a different den. You can take some rags and pour ammonia on them, toss them in the den. The gas that gives off is going to cause them to take their pups, move them elsewhere. And then once they've left, and you've confirmed that they've left, again, seal off so they can't get back in, and other animals aren't likely to den there. So if you know you have a shed that has a gap underneath it, or a deck or a porch that has a gap underneath it, proactively seal that up so that they can't as easily get in there to form a den.
So the animal control people won't come.
I don't know whether they would come or not. Likely they're going to give you advice. If you needed assistance with that, there are problem animal control agents. So if you go to our website, so mass.gov/Mass Wildlife, and you search in the box, find a problem animal control agent, it will come up with a map that will list these folks in your area. You could call one up and they would potentially come out and either try to help remove the animals or help you seal that up if you needed assistance with that.
I personally don't agree with it, but I've been reading in the papers that places like that have hunts on the coyotes. What's up with that situation?
So the person referenced the situation that is currently happening in the hunt, where you've probably seen that in the media in recent days. And so that is a different situation than what you've been dealing with here in town. There, the coyotes have developed very aggressive behaviors towards people, where instead of attacks, remember Chalis showed you the progression of behaviors from daytime activity up to attacks on people and what's more serious. There, you're having multiple attacks of dogs on short leashes. You're having a 12-year-old girl chased down the street by coyotes and having to be rescued by a neighbor driving by and she was walking her dog. People regularly being surrounded by packs of coyotes. So now no longer is the aggression directed towards the pets, but it's being directed towards people, and there's zero fear of people. So I've worked very closely with the town to put out some of the same information that you're getting tonight. I did a presentation for the town in trying to teach the harassment, the removing of food sources, to proactively try to resolve these situations. Unfortunately, it hasn't done so. And so it was our recommendation to the town that those animals should be removed because they pose a public safety threat. It is not an attempt to control coyote numbers in the town. It is simply trying to address those problem animals. Once they're removed, it goes back to coexisting with coyotes. We're not going to eradicate coyotes in the town, and we've stressed that with them. So still teaching them these same things to coexist with the animals moving forward. But if there was a public safety threat, we would suggest that that animal be removed.
Okay, I walk 3 miles every day, and I go out early in the morning. I've had 4 encounters with them in my walk. The last one, I was really scared. And then I know neighbors treated, it was very narrow, and it was raining that morning, and I'm walking with an umbrella down the street, and all of a sudden, there he is, right in the middle of the paving street, walking towards me. I didn't know he was supposed to, I thought he was supposed to be quiet. I didn't know he nobody around. I'm all by myself. There's old lady out there. So, he's coming, but then some cars came and he disappeared. And I said, now I'm in my home, what do I do? So I went over by our house and stood there. All of a sudden, he's there again. And I said, maybe he'll walk by me. He said again, he disappeared. I'm only two streets away from where I live. And now I decided, I'm going to turn around and go back to my house. I don't know where he is. I turned around, he's back. In the middle of the street, I'm on the sidewalk. I had a car that pulled up beside me and said, do you know there's a coyote walking right back here? I went, yes. He said, do you want to run? He said, yeah. I didn't know this county. And I was going 2 streets up, he let me get out and got out. But I didn't know you, and I thought maybe I should have stayed here if I was quiet. The house I was at, I know the person that lived in there, he had a little dog, I told him what happened. He said, Karen, I was up there, and the same thing happened. He came down, I had my dogs. I didn't know what to do. I picked them up, and I held them. He said, he lost my mind. So I had a contact with they ran out when I was out on Bar Street, doing went flying right in front of me, sailed right up over the wall, I went into the cemetery. Another one, I'm walking down Bar Street, I look over, there he is, just laying there in the sun, looking at me, looking at the cars going by. I just kept going. You know, I don't feel like it's supposed to do that. I was just quiet, you know.
And so, you know, as Chalis said, if you're not comfortable, this was in response to multiple interactions with coyotes on walks and seeing them. And for the most part, the coyotes just kind of went about their business. You know, they went the other way or ran across and ran by.
That's when I was on.
Yep.
Because we have children walking down the street there. Now, it was an hour before, I was concerned about children. And some of the neighbors said that to me.
Yep.
And I was saying, if they saw it, would they scream? I didn't think there was supposed to scream, but I guess they're supposed to.
Yeah, so there was concern also about children in the area too.
What to do.
Yep. Yep, and so, you know, keep in mind, again, that there are coyotes in every single community in Massachusetts, and they're on the streets as kids are waiting for the bus, they're going home, they're playing on the playground, and again, we don't see negative encounters. So just because they're there, I understand the fear for children, but at the same time, sometimes we can exaggerate what the fear or what the danger actually is there. But yeah, you said you had an umbrella with you. That's where you can, you know, rapidly take it and open it up, and that can startle the animal. So that's good. I mean, as much as that was scary because you were in close proximity to it, it ignored you. So it wasn't like this animal was aggressive towards you. And so if you're not comfortable hazing, you don't have to haze in every single situation. But, you know, yeah, be aggressive, yell, but the animal was kind of ignoring you and just going about its business. So that's actually an indication that, you know, it's more indifferent to you than anything else.
This is going to be a scenario, and I hope I never have to run into it. My question is, my neighborhood, children around the backyard, we just spoke about someone, child man, attacked or touched by coyotes, but on television. I would like to know, if I hear a screaming child and I walk by and there's a coyote attacking that child, do I take my phone and call you? Or do I take my gun out to kill that sucker?
So, our chief may not be here anymore. So if you encounter a serious incident, so this was referencing potential encountering an attack on a child, you know, what should you do? Should you call us? Absolutely not. My office is near Worcester. I live an hour west of there. I'm not going to get out here for 3 hours. So call 911. Call 911.
You want me to take my phone out?
Yep, I know, I understand, I know where you're going. So, the point is, if you're having a serious encounter, call 911 because your local police can be there in minutes. They can respond effectively.
What are they going to do?
They're going to dispatch that animal if they encounter it.
They're going to dispatch it?
Yes. That would be our recommendation anytime.
I have a gun permit,
I know, just let me finish. So legally, from the biology perspective, yes, shoot the animal. However, you are in a place that is highly developed, and there are firearms laws that go into place. So I'm not going to come after you for shooting the coyote by any stretch of the imagination. But whether or not your chief of police does for a firearms violation may be a different story. So from my perspective, absolutely. If you're being attacked by a coyote, any of the recommendations to not injure or whatever are out the window. You are fighting that thing off with tooth and nail and everything you can find. If you can find a big stick, if you can kick it, you can punch it. You're trying to stop an attack of a wild animal.
My question.
I do not have the legal authority to grant you to discharge a firearm in a developed location. I am a biologist. I do not have the ability to do that. So call your local police and ask them what they would do.
In the meantime, that child has been eaten by that coyote. My question is,
yes.
Hear me out. That's not danger of being shot by a neighbor.
Animal that shoots the child.
Use common sense. My question, your questions are stupid. That happened. Okay. You're repeating and I take my licensed gun out and go to that coyote and put it to the head. That's where you shoot it. Don't shoot yourself in the foot.
So again, it's not going to be an issue for me. Again, that's a question for your chief of police. Because I don't have the ability to give you permission to shoot a firearm in town. I don't have that ability.
So, I know a lot of the concern is Forestdale Cemetery. So, I'm the superintendent and also the tree warden for the city of Malden. So anyone that's worried about walking through the cemetery can always come to the office and we will give you an escort wherever you'd like to go. And we'll stay with you as long as you like. I live with them. I live in the house at the cemetery. I walk with them. I talk to them. I'm a little crazy. But so far, they haven't been aggressive at all. And if it eases anyone's concerns through the cemetery as well, there are no dens in the cemetery. They are all outside the borders of the walls. So you should never be within a den within walking distance. So I just wanted to let everybody know, you can come to the office, you can call the cemetery, 397-7191. Ask for me. If I'm not there, one of the cemetery employees will give you an escort and give you whatever you need. Okay?
Any last couple questions here? Stop feeding.
Yeah, so the question was about feeding birds, and we get this all the time. We both deal with bears a lot too, and unfortunately bird feeders do attract wildlife to your yards. And so the recommendations are going to be, bird baths, bird houses, planting wildflowers and lots of flowers that are going to attract birds and other and butterflies and things. So you can attract those birds without providing food, and that would be our recommendation.
And you'll get varying species that way too. By having more native plants that would attract, leaving them up through the winter, not cutting them down like most people do, you'll help attract more varying species of birds as well. Yeah, and they'll stay around longer. Last question?
Every year I put a scarecrow and an owl in the garden. Is there something you can put in the yard for a coyote?
Yeah, so there was a question about, he has a scarecrow and an owl in the garden to deter crows and other things from getting into the garden. Is there something you can put in the yard to deter coyotes? And we get this question a lot, whether it's putting something out there or using wolf urine or something else, strobe lights that's going to deter them. The unfortunate thing is coyotes are very smart and they're very adaptable. So if you plant a scarecrow in the middle of the yard or something else that's going to scare them, the first time they come through, it might startle them. But after that, it's like, yep, that's that thing that's in the yard every single time. So if you're going to try to do that, you have to really vary it. Like, you know, if you had motion sensors, move the lights around, or have one that goes to a radio and the radio comes on, but then you got to move the radio every couple days to a different part of the yard. Because they do learn these things over time. You know, everyone's got motion sensor lights that pop on, and so they're used to that kind of thing, and they just learn it over time, and then it becomes more background noise.